Hey, folks, welcome back to another Utah County Republican Party podcast. I am your vice chair and the host of the podcast, Charles Max Wood, and I am here with Ricky Hatch. Now, Ricky is running for state auditor. He and Tina Cannon advanced from the convention, and so we're giving you a chance to get to know both of them, and I've already talked to Tina. So, Ricky, going into this, why should people vote for you? What should they know about you?
Oh, well, thanks, Chuck, for having me on. Really, it comes down, in this race, I think it's a good, better, best kind of scenario. I think Tina would do a good job, but I think Utah can do better. And it really comes down to qualifications, experience, and relationships. In the race for state auditor, I am the only candidate who actually is an auditor with 30 years of auditing experience. Now, anyone can claim that they're an auditor, and I totally get that. There's no special certification. There are some special certifications, and I have one of those, but I bring with me over 30 years of audit experience, and not just one type of audit, but multiple types of audits, and not just governmental audits, but private industry as well. So I bring that host of experience and certification to this race, and we'll bring that to the office. I'm also the only candidate who is a CPA. I've been a CPA for 26 years, serving both, again, as a CPA in private public practice, as well as on the governmental side. And then lastly, relationships. I think relationships are important. And I have developed extensive relationships with government officials throughout the state and earned their respect and their trust. And I think that's crucial as an auditor, as you go out and audit the various locations, the various jurisdictions and entities. It's important to have good relationships there, and I can go into more detail about that later.
All right, sounds good. Yeah. So let's just dive into the first thing that you said. With your experience as an auditor, what does that mean, right? What is your experience? What does that look like, and why does that matter?
Well, auditors were kind of a special bunch. A little bit weird, a little bit nerdy, or maybe a lot, but we look at things differently. We look at things from a perspective of risk and control. And that's not something that you can learn in a couple of years or even 5 years. That really is something that takes well over a decade to establish this mindset, this internal framework, so that when you go into an organization and you start evaluating the organization, including interviews or observations or examination of their documents, you're not just looking for red flags. You're kind of looking for pink handkerchiefs. I mean, you're looking as a well-established and skilled, experienced auditor will identify these very subtle cues that can later point you in a direction that you want. Maybe I want to focus a little bit more in this area. And so having that experience really is crucial to enhance the audit experience. It helps, being an auditor and having done it for so long, it helps you with your communication with the folks that you're auditing. Whenever people hear about being audited, it strikes fear into their hearts, or they tend to be hesitant or reserved or careful. And a good auditor puts them at ease and lets them know that, you're there to do your duty. You have to check things out, but you can help them as well. The audits can be very useful tools for these entities, and they don't have to be painful. Sometimes they are, and that's just how it is, but they don't have to be. So a good auditor who has those skills of being able to identify the lesser evident items and red flags, as well as having good relationships to work with the auditee to make sure that the audit is the best it can possibly be.
Right. So you're talking about kind of the mindset of the auditor, but you also said that you have experience as an auditor, right? So what does that look like, right?
Well, I started after getting my master's in professional accounting and auditing from BYU. I went out and moved out to Los Angeles. I did my time in Southern California. I lasted 5 years, and that was okay. But the work was fascinating. I worked as an IT auditor, or an information systems auditor, and I did financial audits as well. But IT auditing and consulting was my specialty. And it's a lesser known type of audit, but it's so crucial, especially now where everything goes through a system. Everything involves technology, and so as an IT auditor, you go in and you focus on risks that there are some financial risks, but you focus in on the processes. You're looking at some things such as physical and cybersecurity.
Hmm.
You're looking at program change controls, who has access to the actual coding of the financial system, and then there's a whole host of what we called application controls. And there's, does every transaction come in and is recorded once and only once? Are there
Right.
what controls are there to prevent non-value or non-legitimate transactions from coming in, and are once the transaction is in there, does it flow through properly, and is it recorded accurately? A bunch of controls similar to that, and there are specific ways that you go through and test those types of controls. So it's a pretty nerdy thing, but it really is fundamental. In addition to testing the numbers, you've got to have a confidence that the system is functioning properly.
Right. So I don't know if you know this, but I write code for a living, and so a
Aha.
lot of the stuff you're talking about, it's like, yeah, some of that would be nice, and you know, so I've
Yeah.
worked at companies that had it, and so yeah, it makes sense. So can you just contrast though for people who aren't as familiar, contrast that with kind of the financial audits that everybody kind of thinks of?
Well, it's funny because people talk, oh, we've had our external auditors come and audit our financial statements. And though that's a very good process and that's an
Hmm.
important process. In fact, that's the only constitutionally mandated duty of the state auditor is to audit the state's financial accounts and financial
Okay.
statements. Those financial audits of those financial statements, all they really are saying, really, when you boil it down, is they're saying we think that these numbers on these reports accurately represent the numbers within the system.
Right.
That's really all they say. They don't talk about efficiency. They don't talk about controls. There's a little section that talks about controls now. For the past 20 years, that's been mandated. But really, that's it. We're not coming in and saying, "Boy, this control system is just really strong," or we're not even testing for that. We're really looking just at the numbers. And so you have the
Hmm.
financial audit that kind of focuses on the numbers. Now, your IT audit, or if you did a compliance audit or a performance type audit, then you're
Okay.
going to get more into the efficiency and into the control environment and the effectiveness of the controls.
That makes sense. So let's let's switch gears a little bit here then, because you're talking about, okay, I've got experience as an auditor, but then you also said I have a CPA, and you know what difference does that make then, right? Because it's like, okay, we're processes and controls and making sure that we're being efficient with the money. Now you're a CPA, so yeah, where does that factor into this?
Oh, and that's a good question. And we're totally getting into the accounting weeds, which makes me excited, but it's not the most
Let me
exciting.
go get my nerd hat. I'll be right back.
That's right. That's right. So, like I said earlier, anyone can say they're an auditor, and you can be an auditor if you're, auditing things.
Hmm.
So the requirements to become an auditor is just you just say you're an auditor and you start doing audit work.
Right.
To be a CPA, that's pretty extensive. You have to have a master's degree. You have to complete a certain number of tasks and operations for a certain period of time that's supervised by another CPA. And then you have to pass the CPA exam, which is a multi-day exam, not an easy test to
Right.
take. And so when you say that you're a CPA, that brings with it a significant amount of preparation and a fundamental level of skill that has to be demonstrated. In addition, CPAs have to complete continuing education every year, every 2 years. They have to recertify, and a portion of that includes ethical training. And here's the other benefit that being a CPA brings to any profession or any particular position, but especially for state auditor. CPAs have to abide by a code of ethics and a code of
Hmm.
conduct. And in Utah, that's set forth by the Utah Association of CPAs. The other cool thing about Utah is it's actually baked into state code that CPAs have to abide by these codes of ethics. So
Okay.
let's say I was a bad guy and didn't have any internal internal ethics and decided to run for state auditor and be a CPA, uh, by state statute, I would still have to abide by those code of ethics, even if individually I didn't want to. I would still have to. That's a second level of control to help ensure that your state auditor, as a CPA, is in fact abiding by the professional code of conduct. And if not, they can have their license removed from them. Now, of course, that the internal driver for me is far stronger and more strict than what I'm going to see in the code of ethics. But it's nice to have statutorily required ethics that comes only with a CPA in office.
Right. So I heard a couple of things. One, I like that, there's a mandated code of ethics, and, I haven't read it. So but I'm assuming the way you're talking about it, that it has some teeth in it, right? It's like, hey, look, no, you will behave in these ways because it matters to be effective as a CPA. But when we start talking about kind of the financial training and continuing education, and you took a test, for me, I'm kind of trying to envision how that translates into, okay, I get elected state auditor. What skills does it give you? What kind of mindset does it give you that would make you more effective as a state auditor? Um, you know, Beyond sort of the things that I think of as a CPA who does my taxes and, a handful of other things. And yeah, did a whole bunch of school and stuff.
Yeah. Some of the benefits that come with state auditor is, first off, it establishes a minimum level of credibility, which is
Hmm.
crucial because the state auditor's office really is about two things. It's about transparency and accountability. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's, as Republicans, those are like our favorite words when it comes to government. We have to have a government where we know what's going on because we're the we're the ones that are in charge of it, right? As citizens, we're in charge of the government. So we need
Right.
to be able to see what the people that we put in office are doing. And then we have to be able to hold them accountable. And that's not just at the ballot box, that is
Hmm.
working with them and going to town halls and meeting with them and challenging them publicly. Um, and so, as a CPA, having the CPA designation in that office, that really helps with the trust that citizens can have that they have their own representative, their own watchdog, who can now go and objectively and independently go and audit. They can go out and audit all of the various entities throughout the state, and there's a whole bunch of them, almost 2,000 of them. Um, and they can go. They know that they have a someone who is trained not just in accounting or tax accounting, but trained in certified auditing principles. They receive continual training. They have the code of ethics, and they can go in and and objectively examine these entities to provide that transparency, so they can hold them accountable. The one other thing that I think is crucial, and I didn't mention this before, the Office of State Auditor should not ever use audits as a political tool. They should
Right.
not be a weapon in any way. And as a CPA, that's actually, again, baked into state code because I have to be objective. I have to be independent. Those are two fundamental pillars of why the public trusts the title of CPA. And so it's super important that the state auditor's office be used as a tool. We use the audits as, I call them, financial x-rays, where we go in and we take a picture, a snapshot, a video of things as they are, and then we report those. And so that means I can't cut any deals for my buddies. I can't turn a blind eye if they're doing something wrong. And it
Hmm.
means that if I have a political enemy, I can't go after them. Um, I, I put on my referee cap. I go in and do the audit, and that's a crucial skill and a crucial foundation of the CPA designation is that objectivity and independence, and that's super important in the state auditor's position.
Right. So one thing that you're kind of talking about here is being objective and things like that. And in your introduction, you talked about having relationships with other folks. Some of these folks are probably going to be people that you're going to have to audit. And so if you, I guess that's and maybe you can square this up with me, and then we can talk about why those relationships actually matter, or maybe it'll be part of your answer. But if you have a relationship with somebody, a lot of times we see people do political favors for them, right? And so, can you remain objective if you have relationships, and how do you do that?
That's a great question, and it's fundamental. First, I'll go back to the fact that by law, I can't do people any favors
Right.
as a CPA. Putting that aside, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I were to do
Hmm.
that. And I've been in this exact position for the past 13 years because I've been the county clerk and auditor up in Weber County for the past
Okay.
13 years. Now I've had people, people donate to your campaign or they
Hmm.
endorse you or things like that. And those are great. They know when they endorse me or when they contribute to my campaign that that comes with zero strings attached. That means that
Right.
I am not beholden to do their bidding in any way. And I have examples of that. There was an elected official up in Weber County who bypassed some of the purchasing uh, requirements of the county.
Hmm.
Now, this person and I had been friends for a while. This person had endorsed me and had contributed to my campaign. But when I saw that this policy hadn't been followed, I went to him and said, "Hey, we need to do some additional audit. I need to audit this area more." And he encouraged me not to and asked me not to. He said he didn't think that was important or that I would find anything. And I said, "Look, my responsibility is to the people.
Right.
I can't just turn a blind eye." And so I did. We found additional findings, and eventually that turned into a criminal investigation. And
Oh.
we're still friends
Uh-huh.
because he understood that I had to represent the people. But that's the kind of integrity that I bring to this. Um, I appreciate endorsements. I think endorsements are valuable because they're expressions of trust by people who have been elected by you and by the voters. And now they're in turn saying, we want this person in to be the state auditor. They're expressions of trust because they've worked with me and they know that I'm not
Right.
going to come in and be biased or do things for the wrong reasons. But it's crucial. And in fact, somebody came to me. I'll just give one other story, and that is it was probably about 2 months ago. Someone came to me and wanted to ask a question about a property valuation.
Hmm.
And the very first thing he said was, "Hey, I'm excited for your race. I just want you to know I donated to your campaign." And I said, "That is fantastic. That has zero impact on how we interact now and how I will treat you. You get the exact same treatment as someone who contributes to my opponent." And he said, "That's so good to hear. And it's the same way for me. I would vote for you and support you regardless of how this interaction goes because I trust you as a person." And I've always been careful when people are donating or endorsing that they're aware of that. I just because it's so crucial. If you're not objective as a CPA, if you're not objective as a state auditor, uh, you're not
Hmm.
going to have the confidence of the people or other elected officials, uh, and that's just bad for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I kind of asked about maybe the downside of relationships. What's the upside? Because I mean, you said three things, right? It was auditor, CPA, relationships, and so I'm going, okay,
Yeah.
so what's the upside?
There are several upsides. First off, because audits are tools, they shouldn't be personal. It should never be personal. When you go into audit somebody, you can go in if you have that fundamental relationship, if you have a mutual respect, you can go in and ask the hard questions, and
Mhm.
they're less likely to become defensive because they know you're not doing it to attack them.
Right.
Let's face it, just about every elected official, of course, there are some bad eggs, but just about every elected official and every government employee for that matter, they want to do a good job. They want to be transparent. They want to get it done. A lot of them don't have the financial background to follow all of the rules, but the desire is there. And so many times when you go into audit somebody, they say, "I am so glad you're here because I have questions." If they didn't trust you, if you didn't have that relationship of respect and trust, they would be on guard and they would not be open with you.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of local um, financial directors and financial personnel tell me, "We're so excited to have you in the office because we're just kind of worried I don't dare call the state auditor's office right now because I'm concerned that it might end up in the newspaper, or I'm
Hmm.
concerned it might come with a surprise audit. And I view you, them talking to me, I view you more as a partner. Um, and I think that's telling, and I think it's really important. If you have the trust up front, they come to you in advance and they say, "Look, we're having a problem. We don't know how to fix it." And so rather than them trying to hide it and hope that the auditor doesn't find it, they're now a partner, and they try to find it and fix it before it gets bad. It's kind of like putting a fence at the
Hmm.
top of a cliff instead of having an ambulance at the bottom. We're
Right.
proactive partners, um, trying to solve problems. Now, of course, there's tension. There is naturally tension anytime an auditor shows up, and that's healthy and that's important. But because that maintains the objectivity. But those relationships really increase the chance of collaboration and making improvements without the person feeling like they're going to be a target or that the audit's going to be used for political purposes.
Right. Very cool. So I'm going to veer us into another direction. And I've kind of given this disclaimer on every interview I've done, but, and you see it more in, I guess, positions that have more executive power, like the governor. But it does matter in things like the audits of state agencies, and, whether it's processes or money or something else. Um, the principles that people hold to, right? And whether or not they're going to stand on those principles matters, right? And so the example that I keep using is COVID, right? So I was a delegate in 2016, 2018, 2020. 2020, I might have asked about pandemics, but 2018, I didn't. 2016, I didn't, right? Why? Because nobody knew that we were going to have that going on in 2020, right? And
Yeah,
so, whether you like or don't like what somebody did about COVID, the questions that I would have been asking at that time now come down to, what are your principles? What do how do you operate? How do you think, right? So that if you're auditing some thing out there, right, that nobody saw coming and is kind of off the wall thing, um yeah. So the way that I like to ask this question is, what's your background, right? So where did you come? Where are you from? What made you decide to become a CPA? Put the nerd hat on. What made you decide to run for state auditor? It sounds like you're the county auditor, county clerk, county auditor right now. What made you decide to do that? How'd you get into politics? Those kinds of questions. So can you just tell us a little bit of your story?
absolutely. And first, I'm so glad you brought that up. You're one of the first people who's proactively brought up that scenario to me. And I've always said, look, we can't be issue voters because we elect somebody, say, to the legislature, um, and we have no idea how they're going to vote in 90% of the bills because
Mhm.
we haven't talked about. In fact, I asked a legislator, um, you know, what percentage of bills do you actually get input from the public on? Do you hear from them on? He said it was about 5%.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
I
my
That's probably
thought is,
high.
yeah, and my thought is, yeah, but I want to know how you're going to vote on all 100%, not just
Mhm.
5%. And so that's such a good question. So I'll talk about my background. I was born and raised in Sandy. I went to
Okay.
Alta High, went to BYU, served a mission for my church. Was over in France, Belgium, and
Mm,
Luxembourg.
those are my
Yeah,
people.
yeah, that was
My
it.
grandmother's French, so anyway.
Oh, good. Yeah, loved it. And served as mission secretary, starting the nerd idea. It was catching on already at age 19. And in fact, it was there before because when I was in high school, um, one of my church leaders was a CPA, and
Uh-huh.
I really respected him. And I liked that he drove a nice car. And my mature mind, I was like, wow, he's rich. I'm good at math, and maybe CPAs do math, and so maybe I'll be a CPA because that'll give me some and I'll have a good career. And I actually talked with him quite a bit and grew. I warmed up to the idea of being an accountant or a
Mhm.
CPA. And so I even in high school I wanted to be a CPA, which is totally nerdy. um, after my mission, I went to school, got my degree in accounting, um, and then went and worked in Los Angeles for 5 years with Price Waterhouse, one of the large accounting international accounting firms. And then we wanted to try something different, so we went overseas. I went to Warsaw, Poland. I was there for 18
Oh,
months in
wow.
the late 90s and got to help establish their IT audit for the country of Poland, their IT audit office, and absolutely loved it. Loved living there, loved the people, loved the work. It was interesting and challenging. Um, and then after I spent a year and a half there, then I moved into private industry. I worked for a software company that was
Hmm.
based in Munich, Germany, and this was really rough. I had to travel to various satellite offices throughout Europe. So I went to Marseille and Milan and London and helped the users there interact with the system and with the IT folks based in the world
Hmm.
headquarters back in Boston, and absolutely loved that. I felt my job was as translator, not from language to language, but from IT to accounting.
Hmm.
Uh, and I realized that most problems come from a lack of communication.
Right.
Um, so, so I did that. Then they asked me to head up their financial software implementation worldwide. They moved me back to Boston, where I spent a year helping get that implemented. And then my wife and I decided to move back home to Utah and to open up a private school called the Kimber Academy in
Hmm.
Ogden. And so we opened up those schools, and they're based off of the teachings of Cleon Skousen, very much
Hmm.
so. And so I talked a lot about the Constitution and civic engagement and understanding the key principles of good governance. And after a while, I thought, I need to not just talk about this. I have to do something about it. I have to live this. And so I saw at our little town of Far West, they said planning commissioners needed. I went to the mayor and said, what is a planning commissioner and how can I help? And he put me on the planning commission. I served there for 8 years, loved it. At the same time, I went to my first caucus meeting as an adult back in
Hmm.
2002. Um, and it was me and four grandmas in the ward. And they said, well, we want you to be precinct chair and state delegate and county delegate. And I said, well, what does that mean? I don't even know. And I loved it. And I realized the party was good, was full of good people who just, I thought they would be ladder climbers or whatever. They weren't. They want good governance. And so I continued to serve. I became a legislative district chair and then the county party treasurer. Um, and at one point, someone came up to me and said, you really need to run to be county clerk and auditor. And I said, what does the clerk and auditor do? And they said they help with elections and they do um, finances. And I said, you can get paid for that. That's a real legit job because I've always been passionate about elections. I've always been passionate about numbers and finance. And so then in 2010, that's when I ran for county clerk and auditor. And I've been doing that ever since and absolutely have loved it. And I learned something. Actually, I learned this when I went on to the planning commission. I thought I was teaching the Constitution. I was giving lectures on the Constitution to not just students, but to adults as well. I had studied with Cleon Skousen. I thought I was pretty hot stuff as far as understanding good
Hmm.
governance. And then I got on the planning commission, and all of a sudden I realized it's not as clean and clear cut and easy as I
Right.
thought it was. It's not just a theoretical exercise. There are real people involved, and it's a challenge, and that humbled me quite a bit. And I was able to step back and say, okay, I clearly don't have all the answers, and that was a fundamental shift for me to say I don't have the answers, but I can ask questions and I can learn. And um, and so, as a candidate, as an elected official, in my mind, an open mind is one of the most crucial things. I need to ask questions. Of course, I have principles that I care about,
Right.
transparency and integrity and um, honesty and good communication and customer service. Recognizing that as an elected official, I'm not the leader; I'm the servant. And if you keep that in mind, it really keeps you grounded. Um, and all the other stuff, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in the things that I audit. I'm an expert in how to audit. But if I'm auditing a construction project or rent allocation, rent subsidies and things like that. I have to learn about those industries and those processes. And so auditors should never come in thinking that they understand the process or have all the answers. You've got to keep that humility, and you've got to learn, because that's what makes the best servant, is somebody who recognizes their limitations. So hopefully that gave you a little bit
Yep.
of kind of my background and why I think it's important to not have all the answers and to come in objective and open-minded.
Yeah, it does. I want to make sure that there's nothing else that you wanted to make sure that people know before we start to wrap up.
Let's see. I could talk about a couple of things that I think would be important, and I really like the job that John Dougal has done in that office. In fact, I gave the nominating speech for him at the convention back in 2012 when he first ran.
Okay.
And because I liked the perception that he brought and the attitude that he brought to that office, and I want to build upon that. I love the transparency focus that he's brought in, and I would want to again build on that. A couple of things that I would do in office. First off, like I mentioned, I don't know everything about that office. Absolutely not. But there are a lot of good people in the office and who interact with that office that do. And I would spend the first several months asking questions. I'm not going to make any wholesale huge changes on something that I don't know everything about. And so I need to learn and be a sponge and listen and get that information before I help establish kind of the main direction of that office. I think the financial audit side of that office, which is the only constitutionally mandated thing that they do, that side has, I would increase a little bit of attention to that side to make sure that it is functioning absolutely as efficiently and productively as possible. I think that's important. And then I would, like I mentioned before, I would work to improve the relationships with the local governmental entities. I think it's crucial that there is this mutual trust and frequent communication with those entities. I would most likely do what I'd call a roadshow, where my team and I would go out and actually meet them at their locations, showing them that we care. We care about understanding their world and the things that they have to deal with. And then proactive transparency. And I like that term, because it's one thing to put something up on a website. That's important. But most people aren't going to proactively go and look at the website. It's nice to have it there. It's important to have it there. But I think we could do a better job at pushing that out and pushing it out in non-accounting language, something that somebody, you don't have to have a master's in accounting to understand or truly understand, but taking a plain language approach. And then lastly, and I'll call it preemptive risk management. There are a lot of great technological tools out there that can help us improve our auditing. It can help us identify problems before they become big problems. And that could include the use of artificial intelligence, the careful use of artificial intelligence, of course, data analytics, and a concept that I call continuous auditing or monitoring that can bring up red flags or aberrations quickly so that we can address them before they can become real problems. Those are a few of the things that I'm toying with as far as ideas of how to build on the good work that John Dougal has done.
That makes a lot of sense. I like it.
Thanks.
All right. So one last question. Let's say that somebody's listening to this and they're going, you know what? That Ricky Hatch guy, he sounds awesome. Let's put him in as state auditor. How do they help you?
Well, of course, from a campaign perspective, donations are great.
Right.
Yard signs and things like that. In the office, though, the best thing that people can do is talk to me. My website has my personal cell phone on it. Now, my flyers have my personal cell phone. I listen to every voice message that comes through, every email that comes to my campaign. I personally read. And it's important to me that any elected official, particularly the state auditor, is accessible and proactively accessible to the people. So the best way that they can help me is to talk to me, to share ideas, and to ask questions, and to be observant. It really is. If it's a government by the people need to be aware. And as the people look and they have questions about their school district or their cemetery board or mosquito abatement, and they say, God, that just doesn't look right. Well, give them a call and ask them questions. And if you don't like the answers, then call me and let's talk about it. So just being good, informed citizens that are willing to ask questions, that are willing to ask sometimes uncomfortable questions, um, that's really the strength of our republic.
Great. All right. Well, I'm just going to put it out there one more time. Here, let me pop up the banner. RickyHatch.com if you want to help him out, if you want to sign or you want to donate. Definitely check those out. The ballots go out at the beginning of June. You have to get them in by the 25th, I think.
Yeah, 24th, they have to be postmarked, or if you drop them in a Dropbox or come in person, it's on the 25th.
Yeah, so make sure you get them in, mark your preference, and yeah, thanks for coming, Ricky.
This is a great service. Thanks for doing this. It's really nice talking to you. Thank you.